This has Leafs fans absolutely buzzing as we are now just days away from the playoffs. We have multiple updates surrounding this series and what's going to be one of the most anticipated series in years for not only Toronto Maple Leafs but the NHL. We're going to break down those new updates, discuss what it means going forward, as well as break down some interesting comments surrounding the players on the Leafs about what this series not only means to them, but some very intriguing things that you're going to want to stick around to hear. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, folks, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. We're going to be going live after every single game in the postseason, including tomorrow's final regular season game. And let's dive right into it. Darius, of course, you weren't available to be there at the stream yesterday, so this is the first time you're on the channel talking about the Leafs clinching the Atlantic Division. Mitch Marner hitting his 100th point. Austin Matthews, 400. All these different things. There's a bunch of things to go over, and let's start with it a little bit here. The Maple Leafs are champions of the Atlantic Division. They've finally done what they've struggled to do for the past 8 seasons, which is finish first in the most loaded division in hockey. It's their first division title since the COVID season North Division in 2021, which doesn't count, and their first Atlantic Division title. Job's not done. So fans are obviously fired up about this. It is official now. The matchup is official. Everything is official. It is the Battle of Ontario. We've heard some Senators players, their coach, speak about it. The vibe is very high. It's probably the most anticipated series out of every one of the series in the league right now, rightfully so. And the job is not done, and it's a little bit scary seeing all this not pressure on the Leafs, but they need to win this series, and they should be heavily favored in this one.
I think there is a lot of pressure on the Leafs now because you have to win this series. It could have been against anybody, but you have to win this series, especially against the Senators at this point. But, to look at everything that's happened this season, they won the Atlantic Division. This is a great accomplishment. The job is not done. You have to go through the playoffs. Your goal is the Stanley Cup at the end of the day. But, the last time you won a division, it was a made-up division, right? And they've only won 2 in their history. And this is the first time winning the Atlantic Division. So a great accomplishment. We should celebrate that. And obviously, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, we'll get to that later in the episode. But Mitch Marner finally obviously gets to 100 points. Austin Matthews is very close to breaking Matt Sundin's record already, and he's only 27. That's absolutely insane. But, when you look at the division, you have to give yourself the best chance possible. The Leafs have now confirmed that they will have home ice through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, right? You want to give yourself the best chance possible throughout the entire playoffs. So love that for the team. They got the job done. That was the biggest thing. They could have let this slip. They could have said, you know what, playoffs are coming up. We don't have to try as hard. This is the last 2 games. We've seen that from this group before. They didn't do that. They said, we have a job to do. And Craig Berube said yesterday against Buffalo, Buffalo is a very good first period team, right? And the Leafs had to come in hard. They played a good first period. They matched that, and then they took over the rest of the game. They got the job done. And that's something I've been seeing from the Leafs a lot this year. They come in and they get the job done. I can't say that for Leafs teams of the past under Sheldon Keefe or the last couple of years, even with Mike Babcock. This Leafs team under Craig Berube gets the job done, and they're the best built team of this era, right? From the outside looking in, I'm hearing it from different fan bases, elsewhere. Everyone's saying that this is the best built Leafs team. Sometimes we get lost in it day to day, of course, following the team, but it is, and the best goaltending that they had in this entire era. So I feel really good heading into the playoffs this year. They have a lot of pressure. I think they have to beat the Ottawa Senators, of course. That is the expectation, but it's going to be an electric series.
Yeah, and obviously these last 2 games mattered, and the Tampa Bay Lightning won yesterday. So if they didn't win last night, the Leafs, that is in regulation, they would have been facing a very scary game tomorrow in which they would have had to win. Of course, bearing Tampa would also have to win, but the Leafs lost and Tampa won. Leafs wouldn't have won the Atlantic Division. It was still a little bit tight there. Now, of course, they got the job done. We're seeing it in Montreal. They've started to fall a little bit. Like, each one of these games matters, and I think that's one of the differences between an experienced. Now, when I say experienced playoff team, they've been in the playoffs a lot. Obviously, the rounds are still up in the air. But Austin Matthews, he said, I feel really confident in this group. We put in a lot of work over the season. Earning the division was a big step for us. And of course, earning the division was a step for us, but we want to continue to push forward. We all know, and obviously it's a big accomplishment. We celebrated it now. We're celebrating on the stream yesterday. It doesn't really matter, though, at the end of the day. It matters for, of course, the standings and the matchups, which is huge. But as it pertains to the playoffs, we need to win. The Leafs, that is, need to win the playoffs. And that is first and foremost. And there was some camaraderie yesterday surrounding Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. And if you watched the game, you saw that they were trying to pass to each other to get Mitch Marner his 100th point. And of course, Mitch Marner then passed it to Austin Matthews with the empty net goal, almost turned it over. It was a little bit scary. Hopefully, don't do that in the playoffs. But he ultimately got the goal. He said it's special. He's a special player, and I've been lucky enough to be with him for 9 years. A lot of ups and downs, and we've been with each other through it all. And these quotes might pull the heartstrings a little bit of some fans here, as this is entering what could be and might likely be the last playoff run with these two together, depending on how things go about it here. It's going to be interesting. And as it pertains to the series in general, from the Ottawa perspective now that it's fully locked in, and we'll have a bunch of videos talking about, of course, streams, all these different things. But Brady Tkachuk, who's been out since March 30th, over 2 weeks now, he probably won't play in the final game anymore. But regardless of that, he's going to be ready to go and expect to be ready to go for game one against the Leafs. So he's not going to be missing any time. And Darius, he's been out though since March 30th, so that might even be a benefit to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously a little bit rusty, but the Leafs to the other side are facing the same thing with OEL, who's expected to be ready, and Jake McCabe and David Kampf, who I suspect we'll hear an update from tomorrow at practice.
Yeah, well, Brady Tkachuk coming into the series is the biggest factor for the Ottawa Senators besides Linus Allmark, right, in net. He is going to be the X factor for that team. He hasn't played since March 30th. It's a different situation than Jake McCabe and OEL, who've only missed a week at this point, right? So is he able to get into a playoff style game right away? He's never played in the playoffs. Obviously, he played in the Four Nations and he was really good. We see what he can do in games that are high stakes, right? So we know that he is going to be, in there. He's going to be the X factor for that team, but how fast can he kind of get in the game? And I think the Leafs can take advantage of that. If the Leafs actually become the initiator this year, they're going to find success in any playoff series. And I think Matthew Nyes is going to be a big factor for the Leafs too. Maybe he can cancel out what Brady Tkachuk is doing, because I'm not going to say they're the same player, but Matthew Nyes brings a lot of the same thing to the table. So I think that he's going to be a big factor. Matthew Nyes is in kind of neutralizing Brady Tkachuk, and early. If he can do that early, the Leafs can kind of run away with this series, because the Sens have some great players, but none of them really have any playoff experience. And this organization hasn't been to the playoffs since 2017. That's a big factor. You bring in a couple guys who have maybe been to the playoffs before and have some playoff experience, but not together. So it's going to be awkward for the Sens to start. I think the Leafs have an opportunity to try and run away with the series early, but it's going to come down to that. How fast can Brady Tkachuk kind of initiate himself into this series? He's going to try and do it. We know what the Tkachuks are about, right? But how fast he can do it, and if you can neutralize him for a little bit, then I think you have a really good chance of winning this series. So it's going to be interesting to see how healthy he is, first of all, too, and how quickly he gets and asserts himself into the series.
And you see this here from a lot of the players. Stoller said it's going to be a bloodbath. Austin Matthews, good for hockey. It's going to be intense. And Steven Lorentz, the goal scorer yesterday, bring it on. I'm excited. It's exciting for the fans. There's a lot of passion. The energy is, it's a bit nerve-wracking. Obviously, we've waited all season long for this. There's still one more regular season game, and they're not able to rest their players because they're right against the limit there. They don't have anyone they can put in the LTIR, so we're probably going to see a lot of third and fourth line action tomorrow. And yet, like I mentioned in the intro, yesterday was Austin Matthews' 400th goal. He's become the sixth fastest in NHL history to 400 and 628 games played behind, of course, Gretzky and a few other greats. So it's going to be interesting there to see how his career obviously continues to progress, and of course with, Ovechkin's historic season this year and his big accomplishment. See how Matthews continues his career. There's been a lot of questions in the live stream and things like that about can Matthews catch up to Ovechkin, all these different things. I think Ovechkin's, of course, in a league of his own in that regard. But ultimately, this is a very big accomplishment for Austin Matthews, and hopefully he continue to do that. And this has been a season where he didn't even put up, and you mentioned it, he didn't even put up a great season goal-wise. I want to ask you this. Do you think the way that he's played this season, it could be more beneficial to the Leafs in the playoff run compared to last year, where, of course, obviously you'd rather him score 50, 60, 70 goals, but there was so much distraction last year about him hitting 70 goals and how he's the number one goal scorer in the league, which he was last year and still is one of the best in the league. But I think the way that he's played this year, especially defensively, may have prepared the Leafs better for a more well-rounded playoff run.
I think that a lot of the noise from last year was external anyway. I don't think they care about that. And I think he was just worried about scoring goals. But the way that he's played this year, I mean, I could care less. Austin Matthews could score 10 goals in a season. It's a bit of an exaggeration. You need him to score. But the way that he's played this year translates to the playoffs, right? He's winning board battles. He's a monster in front of the net. He's a monster on the boards, on the wall. I love everything I've seen from him. Even being injured, by all accounts, he's still dealing with some type of injury, some nagging injury. So I think that type of game translates to the playoffs very well, and the goals will follow because the skill's always been there. But when you're just looking for the goals all the time, which they have in the past, and they're not locked in defensively, they're not playing physically, it's not going to happen for you in the playoffs. So everything I've seen this year from him specifically tells me he's going to be an absolute monster in the playoffs this year. Of course, still dealing with that injury. I don't think he's 100% of who he is and what we know him to be, but I as a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs, scoring 70 goals is cool. Setting all those records is awesome, but we want to see playoff success, right? So, and I think that he's changed his game a little bit. And that's kind of like the growth thing that I was talking about with Ovi, where he didn't play the game the right way. He was electric. He was hitting people. Look, great goal scorer, but he didn't play the game the right way. And finally had a moment around 2017 and 2018 where he said, okay, I got to change the way I play in the playoffs. I have to be more responsible. And they finally won the Stanley Cup. I can see that kind of turning right now for some of the Leafs top guys. Are they going to apply it in this year's playoffs? They're going to have to, because we don't know what's going to happen with Mitch Marner. So it's going to be electric starting next week.
Yeah, it's always going to be interesting to see what happens with them. A couple other things before we wrap up here. A couple quotes from C said here. It's been a long time. They're a good young team. They're hungry. They've taken steps as well. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun for hockey. It's going to be intense. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, he didn't have the year that a lot of Leafs fans expected, but I think if they have success in the playoffs and if he plays responsible, great defensively, great on the PK, everything he's been doing this year alongside, I'm hoping he can turn the corner a little bit, even in the goal scoring department as well. It will be a very scary sight. Mitch Marner as well. It's a special thing, but things like that don't happen by yourself. Big shout out to the guys in the locker room, of course, referring to his 100-point season, which they had a million chances yesterday to get it before it actually happened in the game. Fantastic goaltending by the Sabres goalie. So it was a wild game. The game tomorrow doesn't matter in the standings. They're probably going to rock out a ton of third and fourth line minutes. But at the end of the day, we're going to keep you up to date with all the news because there's a lot coming out. And Pacioretty as well on the outside looking in for now. We're going to keep you up to date. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. See you guys later.